They told me to leave the mansion, that I never belonged, but when the portrait spoke, every lie they built came crashing down. I was standing in the drawing room when they said it. Aunt Miriam didn't even look me in the eye, her voice sharper than the crystal she held. You've stayed here long enough. Your room will be cleared by morning. My hand clenched the edge of the old piano bench. I didn't respond. I had learned long ago that words meant little in that house. The mansion had always been too large for me, its halls echoing more with cold footsteps than laughter. But it was all I had known. I didn't have parents like the others. Just grandfather, and even he was more shadow than man to them. But to me, he was everything. And so on. They told me to leave the mansion, that I never belonged, but when the portrait spoke, every lie they built came crashing down. I was standing in the drawing room when they said it. Aunt Miriam didn't even look me in the eye, her voice sharper than the crystal she held. You've stayed here long enough. Your room will be cleared by morning. The rest of them stood behind her, polished, perfect, and heartless. Cousin Edwin sipped his scotch with a smirk. Miranda, with her icy pearls and thin smile, looked at me like I'd just tracked mud across the marble. Uncle Reginald leaned on his cane, not because he needed it, but because it made him look more dignified. I used to admire that cane. Now I hated the sound it made. I didn't answer. What would I say? That I did belong? That grandfather loved me like his own, raised me under this roof when the others barely acknowledged I existed? They'd twist my words, like they always did, turn them into something pathetic or dangerous. So I did what I had always done. I stayed quiet. But inside, something shifted. My room wasn't much. It never had been. Tucked behind the west staircase, past the servants' quarters and beside the linen closet, it felt more like an afterthought than a bedroom. But it had been mine. A small bed, a desk, and a single window overlooking the back garden where grandfather used to sit. I packed slowly. Each drawer felt heavier than the last. There were only a few things that mattered to me. Grandfather's pocket watch. A faded photo of him holding me when I was 5. And the old leather-bound book he gave me, blank pages, but always warm in my hands. As I zipped up the worn suitcase, I looked around one last time. No one came to say goodbye. Not even the staff. I couldn't blame them. They worked for them. I left before dawn. No driver. No farewell. Just the sound of the gates closing behind me like a verdict. You might be wondering, if I lived in the mansion, how could I not belong? Because they never let me forget it. My mother, their sister, was the scandal. The one who ran off with some man from the East End and never came back. She died when I was 4. No one talked about her, not even grandfather. I was brought into the mansion like a stray pup, tolerated, fed, ignored. Except by him. Grandfather used to tell me bedtime stories no one else heard. He showed me the hidden library, the safe in the cellar, the way to silence the squeaky stair 3 steps from the top. He never said the words, "You're my favorite," but I felt it. In every gesture, every glance. When he died last month, something inside me died too. The day of the will reading, I sat in the corner of the study, heart pounding, hoping, foolishly. Mr. Ellery, grandfather's lawyer, read out names like he was listing lottery winners. To Miriam, the estate. To Reginald, the business shares. To Miranda and Edwin, the art, the wine collection, the cars. And to me, nothing. Not a word. Not even a mention. No one even looked surprised. I remember sitting there, stunned, my fingers digging into the arm of the old leather chair. And then I saw it. The portrait above the fireplace. Grandfather, painted in oils, regal and calm. His eyes weren't looking at the room. They were looking at me. 3 days after I left the mansion, I received a letter. No stamp. No return address. Just my name, written in grandfather's handwriting. Inside, a single key, old and iron, and a note on yellowed paper. Not all truths are spoken in words. The attic is yours. Trust the silence. I stared at it for a long time. My heart thudded in my chest. The attic. I remembered once, when I was 12, asking grandfather why we never went up there. He smiled strangely and said, "That's where the house keeps its secrets." I never asked again. But now, I had the key, and I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. The attic stairs groaned under my feet like they hadn't been touched in years. Dust curled in the air, thick and golden in the slanted sunlight that filtered through a cracked skylight. The key grandfather left me fit perfectly into the iron lock, old, stubborn, and waiting. Click. It opened with a breath, not a bang. The smell hit me first: cedar, parchment, something older. Older than any of them downstairs. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. For the first time since he died, I felt close to him again. The attic was more than just storage. It was a memory sealed in wood and air. Covered furniture, old trunks, framed paintings leaning against the walls. Everything coded in time. In the far corner, beneath a drop cloth, I found it. Grandfather's writing desk. It still smelled like pipe tobacco and ink. I opened the drawers carefully. Empty. Empty. And then, a click. A false bottom. Inside, a velvet pouch. I opened it with trembling hands. A gold pendant, with the family crest. And something more. A miniature rolled up parchment seal in red wax. I broke it open. A will. Another will. My name was at the top. My fingers shook as I read. The ink was faded but legible. It had been written over a year ago. In it, grandfather left the entire estate to be divided equally between his 4 grandchildren. The mansion and land to me, with a note. Only one of them knew my heart. The one they treated like a shadow. I reread that line over and over. My breath caught in my throat. This was no draft. This was final, notarized, signed, and sealed. And it was hidden. I felt cold suddenly. They had erased me. I didn't believe it at first. I didn't want to believe it. But the more I searched the attic, the clearer it became. Old letters between grandfather and Ellery, some cordial, some tense. A few of them hinted at arguments over proper succession and the family's public image. And then, a scrap of a letter, torn in half, burned along the edges. If the will is ever found, it won't hold up. The new one is already filed. He won't know. He trusts us. After the stroke, he can't even sign without shaking. I sat there, frozen. They had forged it. They had taken advantage of him when he was ill. And Ellery, the lawyer, had played along. I wasn't just forgotten. I was cut out. That night, I went back. Not inside. I wasn't stupid. But from across the iron gate, I watched them through the dining hall windows. They laughed. Miriam toasted. Edwin chased a server. Miranda scrolled her phone, legs crossed, draped in my mother's necklace. My chest burned. And as I looked up, the light in grandfather's portrait room flickered on. There was no one there. No one human. But I swear, I saw him. Just for a second. His painted eyes turned just slightly, facing the window. Facing me. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the mansion. Heard the echoes of grandfather's voice in the attic, in the will, in the crackle of old paper. I stared at the portrait photo I'd taken years ago, just a phone picture of his painted face. But now, it looked different. His eyes. They were sharper than I remembered. I turned off the light, and in the dark, I heard it. Not a voice. A whisper. Not from the room. From the phone. Returned. The next morning, I printed a copy of the real will. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. I needed proof. More than paper. More than whispers. I needed something only he could give me. So I went back to the mansion. Not through the door. Through the cellar. The cellar door was exactly where I remembered it, hidden behind the greenhouse, half swallowed by ivy and shadow. It creaked open like it was waking up after years of sleep. I didn't hesitate. I stepped inside and pulled the door shut behind me. The dark swallowed everything. But I was used to that by now. I knew every step by heart. When grandfather was alive, he used to sneak me down here to show me things the rest of them never cared about. The old wine collection, the storm shelter from the war, even the tunnel that connected to the main hall fireplace, a hidden servant's path no one had used in decades. It was through that tunnel I crawled now, dragging a flashlight and a copy of the real will sealed in a waterproof sleeve. When I emerged behind the fireplace in the main hall, it was past midnight. The house was silent, but alive. The kind of silence that breathes. I stood up slowly, brushing off dust. And then I turned to face him. There he was. Grandfather. His portrait loomed over the fireplace, the oil paint rich and lifelike. Even in the dim light, his eyes seemed to glint. He'd always looked regal in it, dark suit, silver pocket watch, one hand behind his back, the other resting on a cane. But now he looked angry. I stepped closer. I know what they did, I whispered. The room stayed still. I pulled the copy of the will from my coat and held it up. I found what they hid. I found you. Then the chandelier flickered. Once. Twice. Then steady. And a breath of cold air swirled through the room. From the wall. From him. I should have run. Should have screamed. But I didn't. Because when he spoke, it wasn't with sound, not at first. It was with memory. With feeling. A flood of warmth, like a hand on my shoulder. A whisper pressed against my heart. You are mine. The fireplace roared to life without a single spark. And then, a real voice, gravel and echo and thunder. They built this house on lies. But the stone remembers. The paint remembers. I remember. I fell to my knees. Tears poured down my face. I don't want the house, I whispered. I just want the truth. He didn't answer. Not with words. But the painting's hand moved. The one behind his back. It slowly reached across and pointed to the bookshelf on the left wall. I rushed to it. A shelf filled with meaningless titles, politics of power, the mirrored mind, Hargrave's legal codes, all props for pompous guests. I tapped them one by one. Click. One book didn't move. I pulled it. The entire shelf shifted inward, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, a leather-bound ledger, handwritten, worn at the edges. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Names, dates, transfers, everything. The family's accounts, the land titles, and grandfather's final instructions in his handwriting. A page marked with red ribbon read, in the event of my death, all rightful titles and deeds are to pass to my grandson, the only one who carries the blood of love, not ambition. I staggered back. They hadn't just disinherited me. They had stolen everything. I stayed in that room till dawn, making copies, scanning pages, photographing every detail. I wasn't going to them with anger, no. I was going with proof. The fire in the hearth burned steadily, watching me like an eye. And when I left through the cellar, the chandelier dimmed again. Like grandfather was nodding. Not goodbye, but go. I didn't return to the mansion the next day. I let them stew. Let them sip champagne and plan vacations on land that was never theirs. Let them toast to their stolen crown while the roots of their empire began to rot underneath them. Instead, I went to Mr. Ellery. He didn't expect to see me. His secretary told me he was in a meeting. I didn't care. I walked in anyway. His office smelled like leather and denial. When he saw me, his eyes flicked to the door, then to the folder in my hand. I said nothing. I just placed the envelope on his desk, the copy of the real will, the hidden ledger, and the photographs from the attic. Then I leaned in and whispered, "You helped them steal from a dying man. from his blood. That makes you worse than them. Because you knew. Ellery tried to speak. Bluster, denial, fake indignation. But then I pulled out the second envelope. Audio files. His voice. From one of the letters in the attic, I found an old cassette. Grandfather had secretly recorded one of their conversations. The moment Ellery suggested rewriting the will. The moment he agreed. I had it digitized. And I played 10 seconds of it. That was all it took. He paled like parchment. A week later, the family was summoned back to the mansion. Ellery called it a clarification meeting regarding the estate. They showed up in their finest. Miranda in emerald heels, Edwin with his new gold cufflinks, Miriam in silk, Reginald in his smugness. They didn't know I was there. Not yet. The drawing room was lit just like the night they cast me out, too bright, too proud. Ellery stood before them, nervously fidgeting with his cuff. He cleared his throat. There's been a development regarding the will of the late Mr. Hargrave. A pause. It seems the final will presented was not, in fact, the true last testament. Eyes widened. Mouths opened. And then I stepped into the room, carrying the ledger. Miriam stood up instantly. What is he doing here? Edwin chuckled. Did someone let the ghost in? But I didn't flinch. I walked past them, straight to the portrait. I looked into grandfather's painted eyes and spoke aloud. I'm here because you spoke. And they forgot your voice still lives in these walls. The chandelier flickered. Once. Twice. Ellery gulped and pressed play. Grandfather's voice filled the room. Old. Weathered. Stern. You're telling me the new will keep things cleaner? For them? What about my grandson? Ellery. There's no need to complicate things. The others. They'd never accept it. Grandfather. Silence. Then they'll have to live with the truth. Because I will not let them bury it again. The room went silent. Reginald's cane tapped nervously. Miranda's face went pale. Miriam shook her head. This doesn't prove anything. I cut her off. I have the real will. I have the ledger. I have the letters. I have the recordings. Then I pulled one last thing from my coat pocket. A USB stick. And I have video. I turned to the fireplace and slid the stick into the smart frame we'd recently installed, the one Miranda had boasted about. The flat screen flickered. And then it showed a hidden camera feed, dusty, high in the attic, from one of grandfather's own hidden surveillance spots. On the screen, Reginald and Edwin. A year ago. Reading the real will. Reginald's voice. If he dies with this on record, we're finished. Edwin. Ellery's on our side. We can fix it. Miriam steps in. Then burn it. Now. They tear the parchment. But not before the camera captures it. Clear as day. My name at the top. The true heir. As the video ended, something impossible happened. The lights dimmed. The fire roared, unlit, as if summoned. And grandfather's painted hand moved. Slowly. Deliberately. Pointed at me. And then. His voice again. I trusted you with my silence. And now, you've given it voice. The walls groaned. A chandelier bolt snapped, crashing onto the floor near Reginald's feet. Screams. Cries. Panic. And I stood. Still. Silent. Until Miriam whispered. It's not possible. Within hours, lawyers descended. The documents were filed. The authorities were notified. Forgery. Fraud. Conspiracy to defraud an estate. The mansion, my mansion, was legally transferred to me within a week. The others? Their assets were frozen. Accounts investigated. Reputations ruined. Edwin left the country. Miranda stopped showing her face in society. Reginald suffered a public breakdown. Miriam, ever defiant, tried to sue. She lost. I didn't move into the mansion. I didn't want its ghosts. Instead, I turned it into a historical archive with one permanent installation. Grandfather's portrait, hung above the hearth, surrounded by the documents they tried to destroy. And below it, a plaque. Truth has a voice, even in silence. Listen, the mansion was silent now. Not hollow, not abandoned, but still. Like a breath held at the top of a mountain where the air is too thin for lies. It didn't groan at night anymore. The shadows didn't lean heavy. The portrait no longer watched in warning. It watched in peace. But I didn't live there. I never intended to. The Hargrave estate was converted into a private gallery and historical archive. Not just to showcase wealth, but to document truth. The true history, untouched, unfiltered, was printed and preserved in thick glass cases. The real will, grandfather's handwritten notes, the forged documents the family submitted, the surveillance footage, the letters they burned but never destroyed entirely. Guests came from all over: historians, journalists, legal scholars, strangers. And every visitor walked past the same plaque under the portrait. This house stood on silence. But silence never meant absence. The day it opened, a little boy stood in front of the portrait and asked his mother, "Is he the one who made the ghost go away?" She smiled. No. His grandson did. Edwin was last seen in the Caribbean, working under a false name. Word spread that he drank too much and whispered to himself at night about a portrait that moved. Miranda tried to revive her socialite image, but the video kept resurfacing. She lives quietly now, changed her surname, never speaks of her family. Reginald passed away 2 months after the estate flipped. Stroke, they said. Some say he screamed my name in his sleep the night before. Miriam tried to rebuild. She even wrote a memoir. But no publisher would touch it. The world believed the documents. The recordings. Me? She came to the archive once. Stood beneath the portrait trembling. "I raised you," she hissed. I said nothing, because that was the lie that hurt most. A week before the mansion reopened, a letter arrived. Unmarked. Inside, a photo of grandfather, holding me as a toddler, asleep in his arms. On the back, in faded pen, "You always belonged." They just never saw it. I never figured out who sent it. Maybe the house did. The portrait's secret. 2 months later, I had the painting removed for restoration. Not because it was damaged, but because I felt something underneath it. And I was right. Behind the canvas, hidden between wood and cloth, was a second layer. A handwritten message in grandfather's script. "If they ever silence you, speak through me." This house remembers. And I do, too. Now, years later, I stand outside the estate and watch visitors walk up the marble stairs. They take photos of the garden grandfather once tended. They stare in at the enormous fireplace. They whisper stories of betrayal and justice and paintings that speak. They look at the house with wonder. But I see it for what it is. A tombstone. Not of a man, but of a dynasty built on arrogance. And a cradle. Of one truth, born through silence and set free through fire. I never wanted vengeance. Only to be seen. He saw me. And through him, the world did too. Now I live quietly. No mansion. No title. Just peace. And sometimes, on cold nights when the wind slips through my window just right, I hear his voice again, whispering, "You were never the ghost. They were."